Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Girl Dad Show. Today I have a very special guest that I'm very excited to interview because I feel like I'm going to learn a ton about being a dad and as well as a content creator. And so I'd love to welcome Larry to the show. Larry, do you mind sharing with the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living?
Sure. So I am the host and founder of the Dad Edge podcast, as well as the Dad Edge Alliance, which is our mastermind community, which is also the Dad Edge Boardroom, which is also our community for business owners as well. I serve men, husbands, fathers. We coach around marriage, parenting, healthy mind, healthy body, leadership, and finances. So that is my shtick. That's what I've been doing now for the past decade.
I love that, man. And talk to us about how you got into this. Like, what was the impetus, the origin story for this journey?
Yeah, this happened probably in 2011 or so. My son was right around the age of 4. He had an older brother at the time who was 6. But I woke up on a Sunday morning, and there was something really interesting about the day. I just noticed like the sunlight was coming in from the window in a certain way, and I opened up the blinds, and the sunlight hit my face in such a way that I was like just divinely bestowed with all of the information of what it means to be a good father and a good husband. And I just felt really compelled to share it with the world.
And can you share a little bit about the pillars? I'm assuming you have a lot of stuff that you can't share because it's probably part of the process and program. But generally, do you mind sharing a little couple nuggets?
I'm totally pulling your leg, man. Like, I am totally full of crap. No, I wish I could say it started.
The whole story was just,
everything I just told you was totally bogus, except for the stuff that we teach. Yeah. How did it happen?
Yeah.
I'll give you a really 30,000 foot view because, this is, I think it started when I was a kid. So like, yeah. My mom and biological father, they got married really young. I think they were like 21. They got married in 71. They had me in 1975. And then about 9 months after I was born, my dad and mom went through a horrific, horrible divorce. And my dad left, like completely left out of the picture. Didn't have a dad. I have no recollection of him. And then my mom got remarried when I was 4. And the interesting thing about that is I actually thought that's how dads came to be, is that we just sort of magically appeared as kids, and then moms like find dads along the way. And my mom got remarried, or she got remarried when I was 4. I thought it was her first marriage at the time, but that guy adopted me. That's why I have the last name that I do. And it was 6 years they were together. They were together till I was 10. But I can tell you that it was horrific, absolutely horrific. He was a white collar data software engineer. He had a high level job at the time. And he was a heavy drinker, and he was very heavy handed. So like it wasn't uncommon for him to get drunk, my mom to get drunk, and he would beat me up. He'd beat up my mom. He'd say horrible things. And that went on for 6 years, and it was horrible. Oh my gosh. But they got divorced when I was 10. And there's a part of me as a 10-year-old kid, man, like I was very relieved to see him go, but I was also like, this sucks. Like I don't have a dad anymore. But I started understanding that this guy came into my life when I was 4, and I'm like, where did I even come from? And I knew about the birds and the bees at that point. So I asked my mom, I'm like, hey, like, do I have, like, where did I come from? And my mom was like, well, I was actually married before. And I'm like, what? I had no idea. It's like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, I was married. You have a dad out there who is my ex-husband, your dad. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's doing. Like, I haven't talked to him in a decade. And I'm like, holy crap. And she showed me like the wedding photos, and I was like, oh my God, like this is what he looks like, and like how tall he is, like what he did, and like he was in the army and like all this other stuff. And so then a couple years go by, and I won't get into the detail of it for the time, but I accidentally met him. It was not on purpose, but I ran into my dad, and I didn't know it, but he lived 3 miles from us.
Holy cow.
Yeah. He was remarried, had a 2-year-old son, and he had another one on the way. And like when I met him, dude, I was like overjoyed. I was like, oh my God, this is like my dad. Like I started calling him dad right out of the gate. Like the guy like came to all my little league games, like every week, hung out with me every week. I spent time with his family, my little younger half brother, his wife. Like, dude, it was awesome. And then after like 6 months, my dad kind of like started to pull away a little bit, and I didn't really understand why. And I remember us having a conversation. I'll be very honest with you. I don't remember what we said. I just remember that conversation when I was 12, we went our separate ways. And that was freaking devastating, man. My dad, my biological father, lost him twice. Stepdad lost him. Well, then my mom just continued to date like all these random, horrible party animal, toxic, abusive men. Like every guy she was with or married, same guy, or I'm sorry, different name, different face, but same kind of guy. Like wow. Toxic partier abuser. My mom got married a total of 3 times. Dated several men in between, all the same. So like my childhood was filled with like these just toxic, ridiculous dudes who were just over time they just leave. And by the way, I don't share any of this out of pity. It's part of my journey. It's made me a better person. But yeah, I went on to be, I guess, fairly normal despite all that. Like I didn't like get into really drugs, alcohol, or anything like that. In fact, I kind of started. I went the other direction. I got my degree. Got into medical device sales, had a really great job, married my college sweetheart. Fast forward till I'm 30. Yeah. Been married for a couple of years. Great job. Wife had a great job. Pregnant with our first kid. I'm in a Starbucks for a business meeting in St. Louis where I live. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there with a group of us, and I look up, and who comes walking in for his morning coffee? My father. Crazy. The one I hadn't seen since I was 12. And my biological father. I was like, holy crap. That's my dad. And long story short, that serendipitous moment has now turned into the past 20 years we've had a relationship, and we've got a good one. And he's still married to the same woman. He's a very successful entrepreneur. I have 2 younger half brothers that are wildly successful and really good young men. And it's been good. But I'll tell you, when I became a father, I had no clue what the heck I was doing, man. And I wanted to be a good dad so much. But I'll tell you, I wasn't the most patient guy. I was trigger happy with my temper. I was very frustrated. I didn't know how to be married. I wanted to be married one time because my mom had been in and out of relationships. And I was just falling on my face, man, just over and over and over and over again. Nothing was terrible, so I wasn't abusing anybody or anything like that. But I was getting tripped up constantly. Finally, this all came to a head when my oldest son was 6. So this went on for 6 years. And my youngest at the time was 4. And at that time, I had a really bad day at work. I lost my number 1 surgeon that I worked with, my number 1 customer that was going to impact like my income for like the next year and a half, like 60%. So I was in a really horrible, big book. Yeah. It was, I was in a really bad headspace. And my son stepped out of line that night, and I always made a promise to myself, and that was I'm never going to hit my kids out of anger. Never, ever, ever, because I remember that. And I spanked my 4-year-old son, and I did it out of reaction. And as soon as I did it, he tripped and he fell. So by my hand, my son fell. And I immediately was like, oh, my God. I was like, I don't even know what I just did. And I went to, like, help him up, so I, like, reached out my hands like this. And he kind of like rolled over and he saw me coming and he just did this. Oh, no. He like he closed his eyes and was like, please don't hurt me. And dude, that was 13 years ago. Like that image is burned in my head, you know? And I saw not only my son helpless, terrified of me, but in him, I also saw me growing up. Because that's what my life was like. And I was like, what the hell, man, am I doing here? And then that was it. I that was the line in the sand for me, man. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I was desperate to learn. So that night, I was like, I surrender. I'm done. I got to figure this out. I'm asking for help. I'll hire coaches. I'll go to masterminds. I'll get a therapist. I'll read books. I'll do whatever it takes to learn. Yeah. And that's what literally, man, that's what the last like 13 years have been. It's been learning. And that's how the podcast got started. That's how all this got started. And here's the interesting thing. My oldest now is 18. Yeah. So I have 4 boys, 18, 17, 11, and 8. Or actually 9 as of today. And I'll tell you, not every day is sunshine and rainbows. It's still hard. You know, but it's it's been so much better, learning a better way.
Yeah. Well, and then where did you find the most benefit from learning from this? Like, how did you do that? Like, how did you even like start? What is the process of breaking that, man? That's like a wild situation you put yourself in, and then trying to get out of that's like, where do you even start?
It was a little crazy. So yeah, I'll start with what happened actually that night. So what do we do as adults when you have a horrible moment or you just want to escape or whatever? You go on Facebook and you see everybody else's wonderful life. And that's exactly what I did. Gosh. So if you can imagine me in my office, because I had a home office at the time, I've got like tears running down my eyes. I feel like the biggest piece of crap like known to man. And I'm on Facebook and I'm just scrolling through crap, just trying not to think of what I just did. And in the corner, I see this button that says create a page. And I'm like, and I just clicked it. I'd never created a page, nothing. And it said, this thing pops up, says, what do you want to name your page? And I just literally, without even thinking, the Good Dad Project. That's what I typed in there. And that was me. I was the project. Like, I was just like, you know what? Anything I've ever been good at in my life, anything. And there hasn't been a whole lot. But like, for instance, I was into martial arts for about 12 years. I loved it. Nice. I was like, I'm pretty okay with that. Like, why? Well, it's because I've been doing it for over a decade and I learn. I have a community. I have a coach who teaches me all this stuff. Like, I have an environment where I go learn. Well, same thing with school, same thing with my job. And then I started thinking about like, well, what have I done in parenting and what have I done for being a married man? Absolutely zero, none. So that Facebook page, what I decided to do is I was like, this is going to be like my own messy, authentic learning journal. Like, cause I wasn't a big, so I would go out and research something. Like I would Google, how do I be
doing it
more
in
patient?
public. That was your way of kind of documenting the journey. It's like your public journal.
It was like my public journal, but to be quite honest, it was just for me. I never did it for a following. Like I didn't even know anything about that. I didn't care about that. I was just like, this is my page. I'm just going to like keep a log of everything here. And I just started learning, like, I'm like, okay, well, shit, like, if I want to be more patient, like, I need to be more responsive and less reactionary. How do I do that? Well, I can create some space between reaction and response. How do I do that? Oh, I can breathe. I can do all these other things. So I started, like, learning and curating this information that I was learning. And then I was like, maybe I should start a blog because, like, that seems more professional. It just seems like something just for me. I did that. It was called the Good Dad Project, gooddadproject.com. And then a couple of years of that, I was like, I think I want to talk to people way smarter than me. Like, what does that look like? And then in 2015, I launched the podcast. And then I was just like, I couldn't get enough of that, man. And still to this day, 1,300 episodes, a decade of doing this, I still can't wait to get behind this microphone so I can learn from people smarter than me. And that's awesome. That's just been the way I've learned. And just by curating everything on, well, now it's thedadedge.com. But I mean, dude, we have enough information there to keep people busy for a decade, I think.
Yeah, you've had some incredible guests. Like, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. Yeah, you've really like got to explore some really unique minds and understand some really unique perspectives. So I'm excited to dig into your show and really learn from that as well too. Because
thank you.
You know, this story is super, super powerful, man. And I apologize. I'm not actually ready for it emotionally, so I'm gonna just kind of break down the questions that are immediately in my mind, and I hope you don't see that as like untactful. But I'm just like dying of curiosity. What was the first time your dad, when you were 12, like it was going so good, and then like you don't even know what you talked about, but he pulled away? Did he ever like recap why he pulled away? Like, did you ever get some closure on that? Like, I'm so confused.
I did. So it's kind of funny, man. After me and my dad like settled back up again, you know, when I was 30, and we were like, I had been reintroduced to his family, my two younger half brothers, which by the way was kind of magical, to be honest. Yeah. Like me and my youngest half brother, it's crazy. We weren't raised together, and he's 12 years younger than me, but dude, we are like exactly alike. We look alike. We sound alike. We actually don't look much like my dad. My dad is 5'7", I think. We're both 6'1". So like both of us are like, whoa, where do we get our height from? And like same personality. But that was really magical. But my dad and I we had this relationship where he knew my wife and, you know, I knew his family and all that. So we had gotten to a certain comfort level with a few months in. And then I asked him to dinner one night. And my dad knew. My dad knew that a conversation was coming. So we sat down and we're just shooting the shit. And he looks at me and he goes, so why are we really here? What questions do you have? And I was like, wow, he knows. And I just was like, I didn't pull any punches. I was like, I'm just going to be really, really blunt with you. Okay. I was like, and it's because I'm a dad now. I have my first son. I'm looking at him as a baby. And it's the same point in time where you left. And then you left again when I was 12. And I kind of held him to the fire. I was like, what the hell, man? Like, what the fuck?
That's
I think
right.
I actually said to him, like, what were you thinking? And my dad looked at me and he goes, fair question. Worst mistakes, worst decisions I ever made. And he goes, but here's the crazy thing. He's like, I'm not going to give you excuses, man. He goes, I could have done so much better. He goes, but here's what I will tell you. When you were little, and he goes, when I would come, he goes, you don't remember this because you were a baby. He's like, but when I'd come and take you for visitation, like, you didn't want to be around me. You wanted your mom. Like, to you, I was a stranger to you. And you were like, why? Like, you cried. You hated being around me. He's like, when your mom met your stepdad, because I was actually still in the picture, I just wasn't around. But like, I had to sign over parental rights when your dad adopted you. He goes, that was the worst day of my life. Like, I never thought I was going to rebound from that. He goes, but here's the thing. I left because I actually thought I was causing you more pain. And I thought that your stepdad would give you one shot at a normal life. That was, so my intention was good. The decision was terrible because I should have fought. But my intention was, I'm giving you a better life. And he's like, and then when you were 12, there were some really interesting things that were going on behind the scenes. Like, your mom and I were not friendly with each other at all. Like, she was very mean and I was mean back and I wasn't innocent. And he's like, but then it started like really impacting my own family, my marriage. Like, nothing was, but I just carried stress and tension. And I just was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I need to be focused on this family. Like, this is my priority. He's like, so I thought at the time us separating was going to be best for both of us. And again, really dumb move. That was not good. He's like, I don't have anything to tell you other than it was the worst 2 mistakes I've ever made, and I will never make them again. But that's it. And the guy just freaking faced the music. Like, what do you say to that? Like, you can't beat somebody up more than what they just shared with you. And I was like, wow. And then here's the other thing too, and I'll end with this. I put myself in that guy's position. And I thought to myself, oh my God, like, if I were to have this experience as a dad and I was sitting across from my son as an adult, I would feel like the luckiest man on the planet, like that I actually get this other shot. And like, how do I have grace for him? And here's what we decided that night long ago, 20 years ago. We're not going to talk about the past anymore. Past is the past. It was what it was. How many years do we have together? We don't know. And when I met my dad, he was 56 and now he's 76. Yeah. And I don't care anymore. What I do care about is what kind of incredible relationship can we cultivate now? That's my focus, not the stuff in the past.
I love that. And that level of empathy has got to be so hard to harness. But I mean, just from the outside in, obviously I'm just saying this because I'm not emotionally tied to it like you are, but he was also probably really young and inexperienced as well too. Do you know what I mean? Can you imagine like trying to make those decisions and trying to like battle the emotions with no real, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, they were less sophisticated, our dads were less sophisticated when they were dads because we're roughly the same age, but like they weren't as in tune, I don't think, as we are to our, you know, impacts that we have on our kids. You know, they're just not as in tune to those emotions and feelings. And so for him to actually even think like that, you know, with the lack of education, I'm not by any means making it an excuse for him. I'm just saying, like, it's pretty powerful, man. It's pretty powerful that he, in his weird way, was trying to make the best logical decision, which is a typical thing that guys do. But, you know, obviously in hindsight and deeper thought, you know, it may not have been the right decision. So that's crazy to think about, man. I'm really happy for you, though, at least for the end result. And I do love the mantra of looking forward versus looking in the past. That's incredible, man.
Well, thank you.
That's a deep amount of forgiveness and empathy for you to have, to be able to say that and do that, given the life that you have lived. And I still have some more kind of random questions, so I apologize for, again, being so untactful.
No, you're fine.
But I'm like dying of curiosity. What do your kids think about this story, and have you talked to them about it?
Sure. They know everything.
Really?
Yep. They know it all. There's nothing that's been held back from them. And it's, I'll tell, and here's the other thing too. Like I tell my kids all the time, like, man, your dad is a work in progress. Like, and it always will be. Like, I didn't have this blueprint growing up. And by the way, I'm not alone. There's a gazillion of us out there who didn't have this blueprint. But the only difference is in a very messy way and face plants and mistakes, I'm trying to figure it out and make it better, but I'm just doing it with the right information, right? So my kids definitely give me a lot of grace because they see me trying, but they also give me a lot of grace because of, the experience me and my dad had. I think they also actually give my dad a lot of grace because we've talked about that. We've talked about forgiveness in our lives, but you want to hear a funny story about this?
Of course.
Yeah, so this was my 17-year-old. This was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We were getting ready, and my 17-year-old is very stoic. He's one of those kids. He's very introverted. He's like a savage on the football field. He's on the O line. He's the center. He'll absolutely crush you, but then hug you and help you up after he crushes you. And he's like a marshmallow too at the same time. But he doesn't say anything unless it's really, really something he wants to share. And this was about 2 years ago. It was just me and him in the kitchen, and we were waiting for everybody before we went over to my dad's house for Christmas. This was like 2 years ago. And he goes, "Can I ask you something?" And I was like, I perked up immediately. I was like, he doesn't say that unless something's burning, right? And I'm like, of course you can. He goes, "We're going to your dad's house today?" I said, "Yeah." He called him Grandpa. "We're going to Grandpa's house today?" I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, and you just saw his wheels turning. He goes, "You like going over there?" And I go, Yeah, why? I like going over there. I go, "Why do you ask, Mason? What's on your mind?" He goes, "I don't know." He goes, "Now that I'm older, I think about, him leaving not once but twice. Like, how do you enjoy going over there? Like, how do you forgive him?" And I was like, "Is there a reason you're asking this?" And he looked at me dead in the eye and he goes, "If you did that to me and I saw you on the street, I would pummel you." And he would. Oh, wow. He's way stronger than me. He's like, I would want to kill you.
Wow.
And I was like, it's fair. It's totally fair. And I was like, and you know what? At your age, I went through the same thing. Yeah. I had so much animosity for that man. I thought to myself, if I see this guy on the street, my fist is going to meet his face. Yeah. Right? I go, "But Mason, you reach a point in your life where your dad did probably the best he could, even though the decisions weren't made." I go, "Can we agree that I have done some really bad things in my journey?" He's like, "Yeah." I go, "Do you forgive me for them?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "I forgive my dad."
Yeah.
I go, "He's not perfect." I was like, you reach a point in your life, Mason, where a grudge, you realize the grudge will only eat you alive. It doesn't eat the other person alive. And I was like, so I've decided to give that up and just focus on what we can create versus what was missed. And it's a really, really conscious decision. And the last thing I'll share is I told him, I was like, sometimes, Mason, that decision isn't always easy. I was like, there are times where I look at you, and I look at your brothers, and I think to myself, or I'll hear a story of something, a memory that my dad made with my two younger brothers, and I'm like, why couldn't you do that with me, right? Or, the fact that I had to work my tail off in college to pay for college, and my two younger brothers, their college was paid for.
Yeah,
things like that. But I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not doing that. That's poison I'm drinking, and it's going to do nothing but mess my head up. And I'm not doing that to myself. I'm not doing that to him. And I told him that, and he's like, that makes sense, I guess. And then but I could tell it. I mean, he's a teenager. Like, he's going to have that, right?
Totally.
But he'll get it over time.
Well, I mean, imagine, I remember back in my 20s, I was so idealistic, right? And, just championing what fairness was, right? Like, you know, and like I'm sure he's battling all those same sentiments of like becoming a man in the world, you know, and like how to be just and how to be fair. And so, you know, those things are hard to palate when you have to even take a bigger approach to it, right? And so that's an incredible conversation to have with your kid, man. That's awesome, dude.
Thanks,
I
man.
I can't wait. I can't wait to like have those kind of conversations with my kids, and I hope I'm half as decent as you are with your kids. That's incredible to be able to like talk to them in such a sage manner. Yeah, it's very, very good, man. I'm for one dad to another, proud of you, man. That's awesome.
Well, thanks, man. Thank
Yeah.
you. How
Can
many
I
kids
ask
do you
about
have?
I have two. I have two young girls. I have
Okay.
8 and 6 year old. But how about the other kids? What do they think about the situation? Are they too young to understand, or like
Totally, yeah. But my 11-year-old, so my two older ones know everything.
Mm-hmm.
My 11-year-old, you know, I'm careful about some of the things that I share because I'm like, you know, some of this is just not age appropriate yet. And
Yeah.
plus, even if I did share it, they're not going to understand it. So why share it just yet?
Yeah.
So my 11-year-old, he basically knows like my dad didn't raise me. He wasn't around. But here's the funny thing. My dad's last name is different than mine because I was adopted by the guy who adopted me, my stepdad, when I was 4. And so the last time we were all together, it was so funny because like my 11-year-old, he thinks very deeply. And he looked at my dad and he goes, I have a question. And my dad's like, what you got? And he goes, why do you guys have different last names? And and I looked at my dad and I kind of smiled. I was like, you want to take this one? And I looked at my son. I go, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
I was like, you know, there's a reason. I was like, but yeah, I'll tell you about it later.
So you're letting them in with context. That's interesting too.
Yeah.
And then, do you mind what I ask what your wife thinks about this whole situation and what that
Sure.
situation is like? I'm very curious. I'm like so nosy right now, but I'm
you're
like
good.
dying of curiosity here.
Yeah, so Jess and I have been together since she was 18, and she just had her birthday yesterday. She's 46.
Awesome!
Yeah,
your son and your wife have the same birthday.
one day off.
Oh, 1 day off.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But so, yeah, I met her when she was 18. I was 21, so I've known her for almost 30 years.
Wow.
And so she was kind of along for this whole ride in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd been together with her for 12 years. We were married and all that stuff when I re-met my dad. And I think in her mind, she was like, holy crap, like this is wild. Like she comes from like the crazy uber traditional family. Like no one in her family.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No one in her family, and her family's huge. Going back 4 or 5 generations, not one person's ever been divorced.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah. So being involved with my life, my wife was like, whoa, this is kind of crazy, right? But my wife is, I mean, she's the mom of 4 boys. I mean, you can't be flexible and dynamic in that kind of situation if you're like hard. But she's like, okay, yeah, let's see where this goes, you know. And she is very accepting of all of it. Like she embraces it.
Yeah. It's awesome, man. That's really cool. I find that like some of the biggest things in business and in parenting is like centered around my wife. And that's kind of why I was asking, because like the more I start to learn, because I'm a lot like you too, right? I get behind the microphone to learn, and I try to interview really interesting people so I can learn how to be a better person in general, but like bridging the gap between like, you know, professional success and family success. But like the more I do this, the more I realize, and the more I take the time to think about it, it really centers around my wife, because like she has the biggest influence and impact on my emotions and my mindset, in like how I react to problems, or how I react to success, or how I react to my kids' problems, or whatever that may be. Like there's like this really big Venn diagram, and she's kind of cross-pollinating across all of it, even though she has nothing to do with my businesses. Like she's very, very influential to me, that impacts the way that I carry on the businesses. And so I find it very interesting that you kind of read her in through all of this stuff, because I'll tell you right now, like my wife knows very little about my business problems. Not that they're the same as the stories that you just shared, but it sounds like you guys talk about everything, talk about all the stuff, and she's kind of bought into the whole vision and journey of what you're trying to build here. Yeah,
and she absolutely does. And you're a business owner, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a business owner. Yeah, I own a couple businesses, and I'm I'm actively trying to figure out ways to become financially free through business building. And so that's kind of the new era that I'm in right now. And so taking all my hard skills that I learned working for people building businesses, now applying to like hard businesses like pool cleaning or, wall claiming gyms and things like that. And like actually trying to build like these hard, like service-based businesses that'll eventually cash flow for me. And so that's kind of the journey that I'm on. It just takes a lot of time. And so I started like spending a lot of time doing this because I'm really stuck on trying to create, a different lifestyle for my family. And then I realized that I was spending less time with my kids. And then the podcast was born because I'm like, oh, there's smarter people than me doing this, like, why wouldn't I just ask smarter people that are achieving that lifestyle and then ask them how they're doing it? And so that was the whole origin of the show.
I love that, man. And I just want to comment on what you said about your wife,
Yeah, please. I'm curious.
Business and mentality and emotions and performance and all those different things. Here's the interesting thing. Show me a really physically fit guy. I'll probably show you a guy who's pretty happy in his marriage. Show me a guy who's really successful in his business. May or may not find a happy marriage there, but you'll probably find a pretty driven guy who wants that, right? But what I'll tell you is success in our lives, whether that's parenting, our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, our businesses, how we are doing as a human being, as far as like if we're operating at a high level, I'll show you a guy who's probably really got his marriage dialed in. And that's because, but here's the interesting thing. Those same skills that are going to build you a radical empire in business are not the same skills that are going to build you an incredible marriage.
Right.
But
right.
Having an incredible marriage, learning those skills, knowing those skills will make a greater impact on your business. Because if you have a happy marriage, let's just say it for what it is. Okay. This sounds very, very crude, but there's two things that guys get a lot of validation from, and that's being paid and getting laid. And it's very crude. It is what it is, but
it's absolutely true.
I mean, it is true. Like if you have a really on point marriage, and things are good and like you're dating each other and like the sex life is great and you're aligned on parenting, that guy feels like he can go out and conquer just about anything.
Yeah. Run through walls. Yeah, absolutely.
Run through walls.
That's right.
Yeah. You're dead on with that.
Yeah, I'm starting to learn that more, and I love that you're validating this thesis, because I think I need to adopt more of your style of incorporating my wife into more of the things that I'm doing, because I kind of like put a partition in on this aspect of our marriage, and it's like listening to you talk, like sharing incredibly like much more vulnerable and harder things to talk about with your wife. I should easily be able to do this, and incorporate those things, but it's very inspiring for me. So I appreciate you sharing your story, because it's already helping me. And so at least you help one additional person today in your journey to be a good dad project. So there you go. I do want to pivot a little bit and make sure I ask some of my standard questions that I get that I like to ask everybody, because I want to make sure that we get you back to your normal schedule on time here. But if you had to if you could tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself?
Don't do it alone. In other words, parenting, for some reason, when it comes to men in particular, is we go into like a cocoon, and we sort of like, the podcast I was on right before yours, we talked deeply about this, which is you just try to muscle your way through it and figure it out. And it's messy and it's frustrating. If I were to give myself advice, I'd be like, get into the room where people are much smarter than you in business, health, marriage, parenting, and leadership. If you're the smartest guy in the room, it is time to get out of that room and get into a new one. And don't be afraid to raise your hand and constantly ask for help, which, by the way, is the hardest thing for a guy to do. So the way I described it was this. Before I started Dad Edge, which took me 6 years, I was a dad for 6 years, I felt like I was in a dark room, and I was looking for the light switch. And I kept just stepping on Legos, or I would stub my toe on the desk, or I would accidentally run into the wall. Like, that's what it felt like. That's what the journey felt like. As soon as I got into the room with smarter people than me, and it felt like there were other people in that dark room, but it was more like, can someone please tell me where this light switch is at? And it was almost like somebody be like, hey, I'm so glad you asked. 4 steps forward, then make 3 steps to the left, take another 2 steps forward, take another 2 steps to the right in front of your nose, push out your hand. That's the light switch. Flick it up. It's right there. I've been there many times. I know exactly where it's at. And as a dad who is stumbling, like I told you that I was pretty good at my job. It's because I went through training. I went through months and months of training before I went into, I was in medical device sales. I was in the OR. So you had to be like really on point in the OR. I was in martial arts for 12 years. You know, like you're being taught by someone and people smarter than you. Yeah. So why don't we ever do that with these other areas that we're talking about? And as soon as I got in those rooms and started learning from those people, it was almost like, holy crap. So I don't have to run into the walls anymore. Like I don't have to step on these Legos anymore. I don't have to stub my toe on this desk trying to figure out where this light switch is at. Like somebody's other experience can impact mine. And it's just like, I've already figured it out. I've already been there, this, and this, and it's right there. Boom. And I was just like, oh my God, like that's what I would have done different.
Yeah. And it's like so funny because on this show, I typically interview people that are entrepreneurs just because, you know, I try to find successful people. Right. And so that's the whole thesis is like outside success, you know, what does that look like? But I will say the common theme is that a lot of them just like invest in themselves. Yes. And it's so funny because like, it's exactly what you said. If you have a training mentality, you know you can improve in martial arts because you went through training, and you know you could sell better because you went through, you know, a sales training or technical training or whatever that may be. You can literally master any skill if you just invest in yourself. And why don't we invest in the things like this? It's kind of strange because we don't actually think about that normally. It's not like a standard, but everything else is standard to do that in. That is really, really, really incredibly insightful. And I'm gonna start thinking about that for 2025. That's really good, man. All right, cool. That's a good one. And then as you think about what you've accomplished so far, what are your goals for 2025? Like, do you have like a new barometer of success, or is success the same? Do you mind articulating what that means for you and your family and your business?
Sure. Wow, what a great question. So yeah, I'm doing a couple things different in 2025. My 2 words for 2025 are margin and connection. And I'll tell you why. I learned a really interesting lesson. I'm always learning. Like I'm always falling on my face. I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's that. Okay. So like I said, 4 boys, ever since August of last year, my wife and I have been in a season where we looked at each other and we're like, oh my God, in 18 years of parenting, we have never been this scattered, never been this busy, never had so much demands on our time, never been so exhausted, but also somewhat pretty fulfilled at the same time. And let me explain. So my 2 older guys, you know, the 18 and 17-year-old, they've always been pretty easy because they're fall sports kids. So my oldest is the drum major for the high school marching band. So he leads the band. And then my 17-year-old is the starting center on the offensive line for the varsity team. So Friday Night Lights has always been like, oh, this is spectacular. And then my 2 little guys, my 11 and 9-year-old, have always done spring sports. So like soccer or baseball, or Little League, whatever. So it's always been like super manageable. This year, my 5th grader was like, I want to be like my older brother Mason and play football. And he played tackle football. And then, I have to take a deep breath on this one. I took my 9-year-old to a St. Louis Blues game, hockey game last year, and he's like, I think this is what I want to do. And the joke is, by the way, if you've never been a hockey parent, it's a part-time job. Like,
really?
Dude, it's crazy. Like, and we're not even on the competitive level, but like 3 practices a week. Sometimes we have 3 games a weekend. We're like, oh my God, what did we do? So anyway, one of our commitments as parents, as me and Jessica, is like, we will always be at the kids' stuff. Always. At least one of us. So it's been like 7-8 months of us like dividing and conquering and like doing like scatter, like we are just scattering. And we have been so fried, but also very fulfilled. But like my wife and I have had 0 margin. I've had 0 margin in the business, 0 margin in our family life. We've had hardly any dinners as a family over the past 6 months, which has been horrific for us. So what we've decided in 2025, now the football season's over, we only have a hockey player now. We're like, okay, guys, we are now going to filter your activities through the decision matrix of, does this give our family margin and does it give us connection? And if it doesn't, we're going to have to rethink how we do things, right? Because here's the thing, the buy-in actually came from my kids because we asked our kids, we're like, hey, Like, we've been living sort of this crazy lifestyle for 6 months now. What do y'all think about it? And they're like, yeah, it sucks. Like, they're like, we're burnt out. We don't do family dinners that much anymore. Like, we hardly talk. Like, we don't like this. And we're like, well, we don't either. So margin and connection, that's 2025. I even did this other thing too this year. I am actually all recorded up on my podcast until the end of summer already. And what my goal is, as soon as summer vacation hits, like summer break, I am not podcasting anymore. I'm working Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Mondays. I will be off. And that is going to be my summer with my kids.
That's awesome. That's killer, man. Congratulations on getting so up to date, man. That's fantastic. I aspire to be at that level. I'm almost there. I'm 2 months out. So I'm not. Yeah. But I love the concept of margin, man. I didn't understand what you were saying at first. I'm not gonna lie, but once you explained it, it's very deep. Yes, I like it. It's very, very good. Cool. Let me 2 more questions. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend that you like to go to, or that you can recommend here to the listeners?
Yes, one of my 4 books I'm kidding. But I do have 4 books out there, 2 kids books, two.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Plug them all, man. Yeah.
But no, you know what? There was a game-changing book, man, that I read that literally like catapulted me into podcasting and like really taking this thing seriously. And I've been a fan of this book for 10 years, man, and it's 11 now. Unbeatable Mind by Mark Devine. Mark Devine is a retired Navy SEAL commander. One of the toughest dudes on the planet. His nickname in the teams was the Cyborg. Wow. And that guy really knows the mind, and he really knows resilience. And he wrote a whole book on it. And if there's been any book that I've read cover to cover, double-digit times, that one is a game changer.
Cool. I haven't heard of it, so I'm going to check it out. Thanks for that. That's awesome, man. And then just to bring us home here, when you're not being a super dad and working on yourself and being a project on yourself, and I guess the question is, because your work is it's kind of cool because it's all kind of melded together. It sounds like your business is your work, and then your work is your project, and your project is your family life. It's really neat. So I guess this question, I can shorten it just by saying, what do you do on your downtime? What do you do when you're like relaxing?
What's relaxing? What is this word relax? I don't know.
I know, it's so funny, right? It's like the whole concept of like people that don't have kids. I feel so bad saying it, but like now I understand why people say that, because I'm like, you have so much time.
I know, it's so weird, but you know, I love fitness. Like fitness has been a part of my life for 30 years, and you will always find me doing something active every day. So every day, I walk anywhere from 4 to 5 miles every day, just get my steps in. Nice. And then I do weight training 3 to 4 times a week. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu a couple times a week, and I just picked up guitar lessons.
Heck yeah.
So, you know, the fitness thing and the jiu-jitsu thing, those are top priorities. But then, I do practice guitar like a couple times a week. I just started.
It's awesome, man.
But it brings me it kind of puts you in that flow state, which
Totally.
I never really understood, until now.
Totally.
But even though I suck at it, like I can just tune the world out and just kind of like practice my hand movements and the strumming, and that's what you'll find me doing.
That's awesome, man. That's really great. It's actually on my list of things that I want to accomplish this year is like start taking lessons in golf and guitar. So that's awesome, man. Yeah. Hey, so last thoughts. Do you want? How can people find you? How can people learn more about you and possibly work with you? Do you mind just sharing your information real quick, and then we'll close out here?
Yeah, sure. So I always think the tip of the spear is, if you've never heard of the Dad Edge podcast, the joke is there's 1,300 episodes sitting there for you in a decade of podcasts that would keep you busy. Here's the funny thing though. If you're wanting to take action, I don't really recommend that. Like, go listen to a few episodes and it'll help. But I think this is where a lot of guys get tripped up on like, well, if I listen to a podcast, then my life will automatically improve. That's not the case. We learn by experiential learning, through community, through conversation, and then to go implement, and then to be held accountable to take action. Like that's actually how our life changes. So podcast is great, but if you're a 9 to 5 career guy, We have a community called the Dad Edge Alliance, which is our mastermind community, which all the things we're teaching, like I said, marriage, communication, connection, intimacy, parenting, patience, connection with your kids, healthy mind, healthy body, leadership, and finances. That's what we do in the Alliance. And then we have a separate group for our business owners called the Dad Edge Boardroom, and that's specifically for our business owners. And a lot of people have asked, like, well, why do you separate those? I think you understand this as well as I do, that there's just a not better or worse than a career guy, but there's a different mentality that goes with being an entrepreneur. You got to be like, I think, a little off, like a little crazy in a way, right? And
that's really funny. That's so on point. Yeah, it's so on point. I literally told someone it's a defect. It's a human. Literally this morning, I had the same conversation. They're like, it's not a good or worse. I literally said these exact same words. It's not bad or good. It's just a defect.
It's just, it's interesting, you know, and I worked for 18 years in corporate America, and I remember being like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, but anyway, like, I think that there's a different mindset for that. And I think the thing with entrepreneurs is I love entrepreneurs. I am one, but we are so driven, like put us on the runway, man, we will make it fly no matter what it is. Like, it'll happen. But that same mentality and that same approach is not the same one you want to take into your marriage, and you don't want to take it into parenting. You'll bulldoze your family and your marriage right over, right? And we see this a lot. So with entrepreneurs, there's a lot of physical, mental, emotional, mental bandwidth that goes into that business. You can't really compartmentalize. Like, if you're a FedEx driver, nothing wrong with that, but like, you punch the clock, like, you're done with your deliveries. You're not really engaging a whole lot of thought or mental bandwidth into that. But if you're a business owner, dude, your lights never shut off. Like, even if you're shut off, like, your head is still spinning. So we help guys with a lot of that.
It's awesome. Very cool, man. That's awesome. I'll definitely check it out as well myself. Very cool. Thank you so much, Larry. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, man. I thoroughly was not expecting this deep level of emotional journey that you took me on today. So I'm really grateful for it on this show. This is really, really exciting and inspiring for me. And I, for whatever it's worth, I'm super impressed with you. And just from one dad to another, I'm very proud of you. And just really grateful that we got a chance to connect and meet and hear your story, man. Thank you.
Dude, back at you. And God bless you for doing this podcast and serving the audience the way that you do. I can just tell just by, the 1 hour we've spent here together, you put a lot of energy into this. You just tell it's so important to you, and I just love that you're doing it.
Hey, thanks for saying that, man. Yeah, let's stay connected, and I'll definitely make sure that we link all your stuff as well too, because I think it's very, very important, especially for dads out there, to hone this skill, just like any other skill that we want to learn. And I think it's really wonderful that you're creating a platform and a place for people to do that tangibly and tactically.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Take care, brother.
You too.